amazing.
We'll roll with it. So good. Thanks so much, Alyssa. First of all, again, we might go a little over 1:30, but at any point where you feel like you gotta head out,
Are you
go
just
for it.
saying it to me?
No, you're not. You were so appreciative, Alyssa. Thank you. So like no pressure whatsoever, but at the same time, I'm really excited for us to kind of talk about where we're going. And I mentioned a little bit in like the announcements, we are going to be doing something new with Hub Gifts. Starting September 2nd, I sent a link to like a video explaining it to my GSTLs, and then for South and West, we'll also get that set out there. We were going to walk through exactly what that looks like, but we'll just refer to that video. We're really excited about what that's going to be, as well as, and then I'll talk a little bit more about kind of this re-emphasis on our team huddles and the attending one, serving one, because that's going to come into what we're going to be talking about here, because you might have been hearing a lot about this language that I've been using in our like team emails, or just like culture, or like even like some of our devotionals, and it's this whole idea of creating belonging, almost as if like it's our rallying point for who we are as a team, as a department, for like this is why guest services exists, is to create belonging. We set captives free by creating belonging, and I am just so excited about this, to the point where like this is going to be this new emphasis that we're going to be hitting, especially with the November 3rd church-wide guest services training, where we're going to try to invite, because it's been a while since we've had a whole department-wide training where we're getting everybody on the same page, not to talk about what we're doing, but why we do what we do. Why are we doing everything that we're doing? And now that at that point we can be over 300 people, it's going to be so exciting. So we'll talk a little bit about what your role is going to be for that. But our time here, I wanted to kind of get you guys in on an inside scoop of what we're going to be talking about at this training, as well as your guys' role with that training, but even just for us to dream a little bit about how this is going to change what we do, or at least re-emphasize what we do. So one of the reasons I think guest services ministries exist at churches, we hear it a lot, is to create like wow experiences, or to create really welcoming environments, and a lot of these other things. In fact, there's a church that writes a book on connections and guest services ministry, and it's all about creating wow experiences, and all that's really, really great, and I think that sums up a lot of what we do. But I think if we're not careful, and I don't get this vibe here at the Ransom, but sometimes the tendency can be for these ministries to very easily turn into tapping into Christian American consumerism, but just stamping Jesus on it, if we're not too careful. Because how different then is creating a wow experience at church from Chick-fil-A saying, my pleasure, after every time you say thank you for something,
That's why they say that.
That's exactly it. It's so they can get your money.
They say that all the time.
So, to create those wow moments, to create that experience, which I think is really good. But I think we're entering into a new point of our American culture and history, where people are coming to church is not just looking for a really great experience. I think that's really great, and if we can pull that off, that's awesome. But I think more so, people are asking a much deeper question than, I want a really great church experience. It's, how can I belong here? How can I belong here? Some statistics you guys have probably heard. I've done a class recently called Spiritual Friendship, and it's a lot about how we can kind of have this new perspective of relationship, specifically change how we interact with other people in the culture, because now they're saying Americans are ranked amongst the loneliest people in the world. There's crazy statistics I have these. We won't need to go through all of these, but a recent study, nearly 20,000 Americans over the age of 18 basically have been studied, and it says like nearly half of Americans, 50%, either sometimes or always feel alone at any given point. So 50% of the people who come through our doors are struggling with crazy, crazy consequences of what it means to be alone. And I think we're like, oh, what's the big deal with loneliness? Like, yeah, that's no fun, and we want to reach out to them. But there's a lot more that goes into that. I mean, you could just look at our American cultural standards, and we would touch much more into this during our November 3rd training of like, what is it about our culture that's actually causing this issue? So we don't need to dive into that right now. But there's crazy health consequences even for this feeling of not belonging anywhere. One psychologist named Amy Banks writes that the human brain is built to operate within a network of caring human relationships. But when we're cut off from others, these neural pathways in our brain suffer, resulting in chronic irritability, anger, depression, addiction, chronic physical illness. Loneliness makes people bitter. They make people cynical towards other people. And it's this crazy thing because loneliness actually turns people into really unpleasant people to be around with. So like we all know those people who come through our doors on a given weekend and we're like, why is that person just so bitter about everything we do? And then you don't even want to be around them? Well, it's probably because they have no friends, you know? And so they're in this crazy cycle. They're even saying that loneliness has the same like strain on human mind and body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It lowers, it increases your risk of dying early by 45%, in comparison to 30% with excessive drinking. Like, this is crazy, and I think never before have Americans and even Christians in our culture are looking for belonging as their main means of why they're coming to a church, of this community that they want to get involved in, and there's crazy amounts of science too that talks about like how people are better off when they are so connected and embedded in a community where they can belong. It's where people have a higher sense of happiness, significance, a greater sense of purpose when they can feel like they belong to a community. And so I look at this and I'm like, well, dang, we have an amazing opportunity as guest services in particular to really hone in on this, like how we can set captives free from what the leading people in the medical field are calling the loneliness epidemic that is feeding and fueling so many other issues in our people's lives. How can we set captives free from that through guest services? What is our role specifically in creating belonging? And so one of the things that we look at Jesus, he's always doing his ministry through relationships. Everything is grounded in that one-on-one relationship, right? Whether that's with disciples, whether that's with strangers he's meeting, getting to know. But we also see him interact with crowds, larger crowds, whether it's in synagogues or whether it's in passing on the road or even when he feeds the 5,000 people. Like, that's a bigger crowd than what our teens even see on a given weekend. And so, so this whole idea of creating belonging through guest services is something I really want us to kind of touch base on. And this is where we're going to really hit this home for our training. So I want to introduce this thing called the 4 dimensions of belonging, or the 4 spaces of interaction. Joseph R. Myers, in his book, The Search to Belong, really tackles this. Basically, he says there's 4 spaces that people are looking for belonging in, and they need to have significant belonging in all 4 of these spaces for them to feel like they are significant and like they're happy and like they can really feel like they're getting that God-given design of the community. And this thing hurts like the dickens, like it kills your ears if you scratch it a little bit. So I'm trying to cure that. So the first one is the public space. So the public space are gathering spaces of like 32 plus people where it is what you think it is. It's just large gatherings of people, whether it's at a Starbucks, whether it's at a Hy-Vee, at a Twins baseball game, schools. These are mass gatherings of 32 plus people where you probably have no idea who they are. But the cool thing is about everybody who's in that public space is there for a common purpose. So even if you're going to a Broncos game and you have no idea who you're sitting by, you still have a sense of belonging because that guy's there rooting on the Broncos as you are. You have a sense of belonging because you're part of that. And so the weekend worship experience at the Ransom, that's the public space. That's public space. So when you're in the lobby, when you're in the warehouse, that defines the public space. And then you have next is the social space. These are about 16 to 32 people. So this is more of where you move from the public space into the social space and you're sharing snapshots of yourself with one another. So like you're getting a good idea of who the person is based on what they're saying, and you can get a really good idea of how to interact with them. Our guest services teams, that's the social space. So I think a lot of us would say like we're friends, we get to know each other well, and they're sharing snapshots with each other. It's within that range. But I think even though they're friends, they may not know everything about each other, but they know enough to know like, this is at least the basis for where we can move into the next space. That's the personal space. And this is about 4 to 8. So this is more of your closer friends. So those people on your teams that are really close knit. I think of like Abby Sparks and Brochet, you know, some people on Scott and Gina's team. They're great personal friends. They know each other on a deeper level. Like you're sharing more intimate things than what you would with people in the social space. Life groups often get to this. Yeah, we can kind of get a good idea of that personal space. And then finally, you have the intimate space. And this is like 1 to 4. These are your spouse, maybe a parent, maybe a like a close spiritual friend or a mentor, where you can share anything and everything about with, you know. So that's these are the 4 spaces. And essentially, the church is really unique. We're a unique enterprise because we can provide belonging for all 4 of these spaces to a degree. Discipleship, relationship, and intimates. Life groups and personal spaces. Guest services teams and social, public gathering, worship spaces. You know? And so people are coming in always asking this question, how can I find belonging? So I say this knowing like everyone's looking for these and all these spaces are fluid. The guest services. Bing, bing. This is what we're creating right here. It's this public space because people are coming in wondering, can I belong here? What's that commonality that's going to bind me here? And obviously it's worshiping with the Lord as that main commonality, but what's going to create that culture in the public space for people to even discover all of these relationships necessary for belonging? They first pass through guest services. And so that's why I often talk about how more than anything, guest services is an enterprise of culture making. We're constantly making culture. And I think it's really easy just to look at like, it's the easiest on-ramp, it's the widest on-ramp for people who want to serve and who want to come onto our teams. And I love that, and I think that's so great. It gets people serving. But my greatest hope is that we can see like how when we create this culture for our entire service, whether it's from the public space of the parking lot into the warehouse, we're creating that environment people want to belong to. Time and time again, almost 95% of the time, people who keep coming to the ransom, when I ask them, why do you keep coming? It's always the answer of everyone's just so welcoming. Everyone just is so welcoming and friendly, and it's different from just a friendly interaction. Like people legitimately would be willing to initiate a friend relationship, to invite someone to come to church or invite someone to join a guest services team, to find maybe that new person that gets them into a discipleship relationship or something like that. It's also intricately connected. And when they do that, when they can find that belonging, that sets them free from a lot of these other things that the loneliness epidemic is steeping into their lives. Cynicism, pessimism, a loss of purpose or significance. Belonging gives that for people. And this is and it starts with our teams. It starts with our teams here. So I want to talk a little bit about your guys' exceptional opportunity in this. Because the cool thing is, in order for us to create a culture of belonging here, through our teams have to have a culture of belonging here. So it starts with our teams. One of the things, there's a leader who talks about how, his name is Simon Sinek. He writes a book called Leaders Eat Last, and he says like how our innate wirings are for belonging, and how actually, I'm going to do this now, how we can ever accomplish anything to the fullest of our ability, not just in guest services, but for like our teams, our like work environments and everything, comes down to belonging to what he calls a circle of safety, where all the people who are in this circle of safety, you know, with the leader kind of creating that culture, they're able to pull together and fight against all the different danger that's wanting to come in and to threaten the good of the group or the tribe. And so if we ever want to really have those amazing guest services teams who not just do the tasks and who are there on time and they can just be so efficient with everything, you know, who are there early and then stay late and just a killer with the processes and they're just great with communication. All that stuff is great, especially in our greater emphasis of wanting to create belonging. But it comes down to really ensuring that they feel safe and like they belong within our teams, primarily, first and foremost. That's the biggest thing. So like, I think all of us could say, like, our biggest dream and vision for you guys, like, it's so important, and you guys already do such a great job of ensuring communication is great. You guys are encouraging your team members, that you're ensuring that the processes are good, people are there on time, and everything like that, and all the tasks are done well. What we do is so good, but I think our greatest desire and our greatest yearnings is for you guys to put at the top of your emphasis, the top of your priorities every single weekend, is to ensure that your team members belong to something greater than them. Because when they even understand and when they see how belonging to this and all the different tasks, parking lots, handouts, you name it, how all of that contributes to this, it's going to just explode. And I think it's going to bring everything to a whole new level. And that's just simply having the clarity and purpose of why creating belonging is so necessary as our rallying point. It's kind of it just sums up everything I think that we do. And you guys are ultimately the ones who know your teams better than either Kellen or Karen or myself do. Mark's 10 o'clock team is drastically different from Kyle's 10 o'clock team, and what West Campus needs is very different from South Campus's needs and everything like that. So that's kind of what our discussion questions are going to be. If you guys are able to stick around, we'd love to just dialogue a little bit about those specifics. But some things I specifically want to kind of toss out there for us to think about, because if this is going to become our new lens of creating belonging, then how is that going to give us new goals for us to chase? So obviously the first thing is we're having this November 3rd training as a means to try to get this idea out to all of our team members. And so you guys are going to have a really cool role with that if you're able to make it, where at the end we're going to try to have like 20 minutes of, or 15 to 20 minutes of just discussion, where you're leading discussion with your teams and just empowering them to think about how can we get creative with this? How can we what things can we do? Can we add? Can we start doing to ensure that we're really going to that next level to create belonging for everybody to come in? And you just simply empowering your team members to come up with that is going to create so much more buy-in, I think, than anything that we can just decide and choose to do. So just be on the lookout for that, and that's why even our GSTL discussion will kind of feed into that. But some other dreams that I even have for us is, what does it look like for our teams to be what I call self-replicating? Where this whole idea of invitation, we kind of started alluding to this over the summer with having our teams invite other people to join our teams, not just to get rosters up for us and launch a campus, but because knowing friends, if they're looking for connection, community, and belonging, why not invite them into these friend groups, these social spaces that are all about creating belonging for others? That's why a lot of times guest services is a ministry just as much to those who are in the teams as it is for what they're giving out. I've heard countless stories from you guys of, even Kyla has had a ton from last month of people who have just really opened up and could find that sense of belonging just simply through being that. So even what you're doing is a ministry to your members, which is phenomenal. The other thing that I've just really been dreaming a lot too is, what does it look like for guest services not just to be the widest on-ramp for people to come on to, just to serve, maybe they check the box and they feel like they can finally start doing something, but where they are surprisingly immersed in a leadership development culture, where they're not just like sweet, awesome, go do these things, but where we are constantly thinking about how can we empower you to grow, to go to that next step, to do that whole thing. So we started alluding to that with the assistant leaders, where we set up this new thematic goal last year to go from just 14 guest services team leads to at least 40 identified guest services leads, whether that's through co-GSTLs or assistant leaders in the warehouse or in the lobbies or in the parking lot. We could all get creative with that. So we want to continue that standard just to give people those opportunities. But the reality is, even our team members who aren't in those identified leadership roles are still leaders. And I think how empowering would it be when we start recognizing that? As soon as they put on a name tag, they're a leader. As soon as they put on a name tag with a lanyard that sticks them out from everybody else, they are a clear person who's going to contribute to the culture that they want to make. So this is where, I'm still talking internally, I'm still dreaming about this, but what does it look like to, instead of calling them guest services team members, to culture leaders? or calling them community builders, or giving them this ownership of the fact that you as an usher, you're not just passing out handouts as they're coming in, you are actually creating the culture of the sections right behind you every single time they interact with your smiling face. It's so small, but it goes so far. Or every single time when you're serving coffee, you're swapping out pots, that interaction you have, you're leading culture. You're creating culture, you're crafting this culture of belonging that people want to belong to. You're a culture leader. Those roles just look different when you get to that assistant. You're a culture leader over culture leaders, or even as you guys, you're culture leaders over culture leaders over culture leaders in some scenarios. And that just gets people to believe in themselves so much more, and just will empower them to just explode, I think, in greater ways than we could ever imagine. And that's also where, last piece on this, and then we'll go to this next one that I'm really excited about. Always be thinking about how to work yourself out of a job, too. In other words, a new standard that I would love for it to be, I know, when we come on as GSTLs, maybe to commit to at least a year, but even knowing that by the end of your time serving as a GSTL, you've already had conversations around empowering the next person to come and take your spot. If your season of leading is done, you already know from the get-go, because those leaders will do a much, much, much better job. And when you, first of all, tell them that you believe in them, and you empower them up to that, than anybody on some random schmo, hey, you want to come lead this team? Want to learn all this stuff right now? So, plus, it's an amazing leadership development opportunity for you guys to invest in the new leaders. And then finally, and this is the one that I'm really perplexed on, and I really want us to wrestle with a lot in our discussions. In fact, even if you guys are able to stick around for a little bit for discussion, I'd really like to hit this point home. I think we do a grand spanking job in so much of what we do, from people, as soon as when people show up in the parking lot, to they're greeted at the door, the coffee experience, and the ushers, everything leading up to when they get through those doors into the warehouse, I think is exceptional. But what I'm curious, studies, I'm going to just read this. Studies were done for new guests attending churches, and a question was asked about when guests received the worst experience when they visited churches. And by far, the worst experience for guests is right before the service starts. It's when they go through all those amazing interactions and they get there 10 minutes early and they sit in the warehouse. And they have no idea who they are. And nobody's really interacting much. And that is just painstaking for a lot of people. Even the most incredible churches at guest services don't have anything going on in the worship center to interact with guests or even regular attenders who are sitting by themselves. It's crazy. This weekend, I want to challenge you, just look at a couple of rows in front of you and see how many people sit by themselves. It's crazy. 4 rows in front of you, you'll see 5 or 6, or just couples who are just by themselves. You can create all the scenarios you want for maybe why they might legitimately be sitting by themselves versus being alone. But it's crazy. And I'm just wondering, as we're going to continue to, if we mean creating belonging in every regard, how can this look like that for the warehouse? Does this mean we got to create another usher position who's just really good at shepherding over certain sections who are incredibly gifted for that? Is that what it is? One other idea that I've had, and you guys can wrestle with this as much as you want, but another emphasis for why we also need to attend one in addition to serving one, is because then what if we can begin even guiding our team members to when they go in to attend, and they even still have their eyes open to seeing who could just be the 1 or 2 people just around them that they can just reach out to, and making that a big emphasis. Creating belonging even goes into when we're attending, and at least asking people, what's your name? How long have you been coming here? Because I think having teams of 20 who are attending a service who at least have an eye to at least reach out to one person sitting by themselves will go much further than just 3 or 4 who are trying to just do it all, and sometimes that's just a little awkward and forced, and I don't really know where to land on that. So that's something I really want us to begin wrestling with and observing, is to see what does it mean to create belonging in the warehouse specifically. If that is legitimately the worst experience for guests, how can we help ensure that that's not the case at the Ransom? That we're an exception to that.
I do have something I could go soon, but even whatever we choose, I feel like we should have training on that. Because I think a lot of people are they just don't know what to say to people in the beginning. They just have that, they're oh, I'm awkward, so I'm not even going to say anything. So So like having a training of like, here's some good questions to ask and be like, could be a good idea too.
It's so good. It's so
Didn't
good.
Jason used to do that?
Jason
Yeah.
actually did that. When we started the
Yeah.
so he would come find us.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote that, like a greeter or roamer in the sanctuary is a good idea. But you're right, you're introverted people who it would be very difficult for. It would maybe take the right personality and some questions.
Like a Jason or a Glenn Stanley.
Yeah.
Well, I just think back to when Kath and I first started coming to Ransom. I don't know if any of you had a chance to meet Chris and Lisa DeBoer. They ended up moving to Atlanta, but Kathy and I didn't know anybody at Ransom, or so we thought. We ended up meeting a few people that were like, oh, we didn't know you came here, but this was right when we moved into the downtown campus from the movie theater. And Chris and Lisa were just sitting behind us, and they just tapped us on the shoulder and they said, hi, we're Chris and Lisa, nice to meet you. And we're like, you guys are so cool. We didn't even know. We were just like, we were so nervous to go there and just be new people. And I'll never forget that. We became friends with them. We ended up being in the same life group with them, and yeah, it was just huge. And now they weren't like on a guest services team. I think they ended up serving on guest service at some point, but they were just in the warehouse, and it wasn't. I noticed in the weeks after that, they did that with more than just us. They did that with anybody who sat kind of in their reach. They would just tap them on the shoulder, hi, what's your name? So it was huge for us, because then right away we felt that, as you were talking about, Jake, we felt that belonging, and yeah, so it was huge.
It's huge.
And that we weren't just a seat filler, and
Yeah.
we could slide in and slide out. It was like, oh, they noticed us.
Yeah.
It was big.
And I think the bigger we've gotten, I've heard other people have said it is easy to slide in and slide out because we are bigger now. We are a bigger church. So I think that just makes it even more important to make those connections.
Well,
Yeah.
even in the culture of cell phones. If someone's alone, they'll sit on their phone so they look busy, so they don't feel that. And then it's a little bit awkward to say, hey, how are you? Because you feel like you're interrupting them because they're doing something, but it's kind of a defense
So
mechanism.
true.
It is a defense mechanism.
Right.
It's a good way to put it. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Go spike the phone.
Be like,
Hey, good.
what's your name?
And some people probably do just want to be left alone, but
Well, and
If they do, they're just
there,
gonna, you'll figure it out pretty quick.
well, I mean, there are some people that, like, my dad is one of them. He likes to come to church a little bit early. He likes to sit by himself. He likes to pray and just calm his heart, calm his mind. He likes to just kind of get focused. So he, like, I used to laugh because he never wants to sit by us. And I'm like, Dad, like, I don't want to sit by me. He's like, I like to sit by myself. So he can, like, focus and not be distracted and stuff like that. So some people might not like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to find that difference between the people, because there's a difference between people feeling anonymous versus feeling like strangers. Nobody wants to feel like a stranger,
Right.
but some people want to stay anonymous for a little while,
Right.
and that's perfectly fine. That's a tough tension.
We could label sections of the warehouse.
Don't talk to me, section.
We actually talked about that. Introvert, extrovert.
I think you and Priscilla came up with that, like have a section specifically for the people who don't want to be in our house.
Can we try that on campus for a test?
Karen's your go-to.
No, Scott. You're going to be extroverted with all of them.
You'll be that guy. This is so good. Any other thoughts on that? Not just on creating belonging for maybe in the warehouse, but like, how does using this as a lens? How does this change even like how we do guest services? Like, are there things that we're doing right now that are really doing this well? Let's keep doing this. Things that maybe are like hindering us from really creating belonging that we should stop doing, or are there things that we're not doing that we should start doing that would really do this better?
I have more of a question on that.
Yeah.
Where did you get the number 32? Because like I feel like my family is more than 32. So
Yeah.
with that weird, like what does it have to be?
It's a really standard equation that someone came up with to try to like illustrate the different spaces. Because again, like for me, a social space could be 50 people, you know, because I'm like bouncing around all over the place. It's just kind of like an average. Yeah, don't take those numbers too loosely, or take those numbers loosely. Because sometimes the public space can be you're sitting by yourself in a coffee shop, there's 6 people in there, you know. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great
I
question.
do. Sorry.
Thank you guys. I'd love to follow up and hear your guys' perspectives later.
We got a guy coming to fix our bathroom.
Yeah, you guys are good. We are, so this is just extra credit if you guys are able or want to. Take extra pizza. There's plenty. We're good. Thank you.